Welcome into the Action Network podcast. We are presented by the FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm Brendan Glasheen, your host today. Very excited for this episode, folks. Our 2023 NFL Draft, mock draft special here on the Action Network podcast. I'm joined by Luke Swain, his voice familiar to most of you during the football season. Also on our NFL Draft betting update episodes we've been delivering now for the last 6 weeks or so. And joining us today, he's the fantasy law guy. He has his own content over at fantasylawguy.com, Nick Garisco. Nick, thanks so much for stopping by. Why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself and what we need to know about you?
You don't need to know much about me. I'm an attorney, and I've been mocking the draft for about the last decade or so. All of my results are over on Fantasy Law Guy, and I submit to mockdraftdatabase.com, and I've done historically well there. I just transitioned professionally into teaching now. I teach at a private school in Covington, Louisiana called St. Paul. So that is why my background right now is indeed my classroom.
Very nice. Very nice. Mock Draft Database, which you referenced, had you as a top 6 most accurate mock draft in 3 of the last 4 years. So we're excited to have you joining us today. So here's what we're going to do. And those of you that might be watching on our YouTube page, great. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to go pick by pick, 1 through 20, alternating. Nick will go first. We're going to start with the number 2 pick. Feels like the consensus is Bryce Young. And we'll go through 2 through 20. And sprinkled in as we go pick by pick, Luke and Nick are going to weigh in. Nick and pick is going to be aggravating to the mind, just to get that out there. But we're going to alternate picks between the two guys and also mix in some best bets as well. So, example, if Luke's up for pick number 3 and he thinks there's value there to take a position or what the Cardinals might do, et cetera, we will work in the picks as we go through the mock draft. So be listening carefully here to this episode. So without further ado, we will start with pick number 2. Nick Garisco, you'll go first. Who do you like going number 2 in the draft? And please work in any picks that you might encourage the people to take, if applicable.
Well, I am honored to be here as a guest on this show, but I do think you gave me a disservice by giving me pick 2 here, skipping pick 1. Houston Texans, it's still a mystery to this point. If I had to mock today, I would be mocking them Will Levis, but that's actually mainly because I'm going to give the tiebreaker between the argument in favor of picking a defender and the argument of picking their quarterback 2 behind Bryce Young. I'm going to give the tiebreaker to a potential trade out situation in terms of mocking and accuracy contest here. Look, the Texans, I do believe that they can still take their best rated defender here. They have a massive need at defensive end. So Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, we've heard rumors lately that they may be more inclined to take the potential of Wilson. Certainly they have years to allow his athletic potential to develop in Houston. It's not like they're in a rush to compete now. So Tyree Wilson, they could see him like a JJ Watt type there, which he's beloved in Houston. Look, I can see it. I also think DeMeco Ryans, defensive head coach there. There are reasons that they would take a defender, but I think the best argument for them taking a defender is the concept that Houston, according to Lance Zierlein, who's one of the top Houston sources, most reliable Houston sources here, an NFL draft analyst on NFL.com, according to Lance, this pick has been for sale. And I don't think that the Texans would make the pick for sale if they really, really loved a quarterback here, because you just don't, if you want a franchise quarterback, you want your quarterback of the future, your franchise face of the franchise, if you will, you don't say, hey, this pick's for sale, right? So I think that's probably the best argument in favor of taking a defensive player here. But the counter argument, of course, is there's a lot of pressure on the front office to get the face of the franchise. The Texans are amid a rebrand right now. They lost out on Bryce Young, which was the quarterback they coveted the most. And there's some pressure on the front office to maybe grab that quarterback now. I do believe Will Levis is their quarterback 2, based on everything that I'm reading for a variety of reasons. I don't think he's going to make it past pick 4. So they can't really wait till pick 12. So there's a counter argument there that they need a quarterback. And he just so happens to be the best quarterback available on their board, in my opinion, at the games, at all of sports' most important position. So I see the argument on both sides. And let's say Lance is right that they're going to trade out of this pick. Maybe they do. So maybe the tiebreaker should probably go to slotting Will Levis here. If I had to mock today, I would say Levis is the pick. But again, my certainty on this pick is not certain. It is minimal. I wouldn't be betting on Levis to the Texans specifically, but I do think Levis is going to either pick 2 or 4 in this draft.
Will Levis at FanDuel is the favorite to be the number 2 overall pick at -135 as we come to you on a Monday afternoon. Well, Luke, I'll let you weigh in on this. Are we telling folks at home to stay away from Will Levis in terms of being the number 2 overall pick before we go on to 3?
Yeah, so Levis's current odds are like -140, -145 to go number 2, which it's just are not accurate. Like those aren't real odds. That's just a bunch of bettors betting into the number 2 market and being a highly sensitive market, like we've gone on and on and on about since our first podcast, are just reflecting that, where they have more money on Levis or liability on Levis right now, where if you want to bet into the number 2 market, like your options are like fading the noise and taking someone like Anderson, or looking into the ripple effect picks, because the top 5, top 10 really play out completely different based off of who goes really too. Whether it's a quarterback, either one of Tyree or Anderson might fall, or if it's D-line, the quarterbacks fall. So looking into the future, like you got to pick one scenario and then find the value further down. But like I could not agree more. It is uncertain. I would be betting Levis right now if his odds were way higher, but not at -140. There's like just no. It will probably come down, honestly. Within the next couple of days, I would assume the -140 will come down to plus money at some point.
So we're going to focus on the top 20. And of course, news hot off the press moments ago and in your news cycle, NFL fans. Aaron Rodgers to the Jets is now done. So pick swap occurs. The Jets get the 15th pick, which previously belonged to Green Bay. And now the Packers get the Jets pick in the first round at 13. So it turns out picks in this year's NFL draft are affected by this Aaron Rodgers move. Okay, good stuff from Nick on Will Levis. Let's move on to Luke. Arizona Cardinals set to pick 3. We've talked a bunch, Luke, about this organization because of the rumor mongling about moving the pick. Will they stay put? And draft defense, what position on defense has been sort of up in the air? Where would you lean with the Cardinals selecting at 3?
So, of course, like you can assume this pick has a very high likelihood of still being traded, but we're not going to do trades here because that's a total beta move. Where if they stay put, we have 2 options for me, which you're going to be going with. I'm going to go with Tyree Wilson here, which everything that we've heard from Zerline to like every report coming out right now, really, Anderson is the high floor, where like Tyree is the high ceiling. And there are like health reports with Tyree that are somewhat concerning, but at the same time, Arizona with Tyree, who just feels like he's rising based off of his higher ceiling and his athleticism, I guess you could say. To me, at 3, just feels like the pick. We do have rumors about Arizona having interest in Paris Johnson to the point that his odds from 100 to 1 are all the way down to like plus 500, which which is just insanity. I think I even saw something that like Kyler Murray prefers Paris Johnson, which I think the odds even got steamed even more from there. But at 3, like I do think Tyree Wilson over Anderson is where we're going to go. Again, the uncertainty is at all-time highs. We could get a Stroud trade here. We could get from the Seahawks, from the Raiders, from the Titans. But I'm going to go with Tyree. Might be a little bit biased based off of my bets, but Tyree at 3 just makes a lot of sense, which I think he's also in play at 2. to go ahead at Anderson.
So just remind everybody how that reflects a pick you may have given out already. I think you did first defensive player in Tyree Wilson to go.
Yep. So I think I gave Tyree first defensive last week. It was like plus 300, which I want to say he's the favorite at minus 145, which again is just like a lot of noise coming in.
Is that still bettable at that number?
No.
Okay.
No. Like if you want to bet that, I would be betting Anderson just based off value.
Got it.
And the thing with Zerline isn't connected to the Cardinals, but he's very like his rankings matter a lot to him. And when you see him tweet replying or putting in his mock Tyree ahead of Anderson, to me that tells me I don't know if he knows something, but he has Anderson ranked ahead of Tyree, but he's still putting Tyree ahead of Anderson, which to me feels like he's mocking that and discussing it based off of what he thinks the teams are going to do and not based off of his personal rankings, which is a huge tell for me, which is another reason I want to go Tyree.
Okay, very good. Tyree Wilson at number 3. Wilson, of course, out of Texas Tech. Moving on to the 4th pick. We're alternating back to Nick here. Indianapolis Colts set at 4. They have been connected to all the quarterbacks and Levis and Stroud. Of course, Young's no longer in consideration. Anthony Richardson has also been in the discussion. Talks about the Colts perhaps moving the pick. A bunch of different directions for Indy. Where would you go? Nick, what do you got for us?
I do believe that Will Levis would be the pick here for Indianapolis if he is available. So if the Texans, which, as I stated, they definitely could take a defensive player, pick 2, maybe it's Tyree Wilson. If the Texans go that route, I think Levis is going to be the pick here at pick 4. However, in this circumstance, Levis is not there. And it's kind of a toss-up who the Colts may prefer behind Levis. I do still think they're going to take a quarterback. I'm not buying Levis was the quarterback 2 on their board, so let's go a different route and take, Will Anderson because he's, a double and you know what you're getting out of Will Anderson. I still think it's going to be the next best quarterback on their board. To me, because I just can't really get over the Shane Steichen situation. I think that you have a coach here who's had a history of developing young, athletic quarterbacks who are a little raw from the, pocket passing standpoint. Jalen Hurts and others, actually. So I think he would have the fortitude that other coaches would be more reserved on to take on a risk like Anthony Richardson. So while I do think that, in kind of studying the draft, I do think that Anthony Richardson has this massive range where he could easily fall. Peter King had him falling in his mock today. And Peter King, hasn't been the most accurate mock drafter, but he's very plugged in. And last year, he called the Jermaine Johnson fall. Last year he had Jermaine Johnson for he ended up being taken by the Jets in a trade back in, but he had Jermaine Johnson. Everyone else had him top 12. He had Johnson going to the 20s. So Richardson could fall in this draft, but I also think he could go as high as to the Colts. And one of the things that makes this draft even more unpredictable is like Will said at pick 3, Arizona wants to trade out of the pick. And they could move down, take a Paris Johnson or the Gonzalez. But why I bring this up is I don't think, based on what I've read over and over again, I don't think one of those trade up teams will be the Colts. I think the Colts do plan to keep this pick. And I mean, maybe if the Texans don't take Levis, but here I think they're going to stay put, take Richardson. But again, I could easily see them taking Stroud, especially because of the GM Chris Ballard's emphasis on accuracy. So either pick here, but I'm going to side with Richardson on this particular mock draft.
Anthony Richardson, Luke, to go 4th overall at plus 300, any betting value connected to him? Or with Nick's points about Levis potentially falling there, is this a stay away situation?
I would say it's a stay. I would say it's a stay away. Yeah. Yeah. I would probably stay away from this one. I would need something higher for that.
What are Levis's odds to be the second quarterback taken? Because I know I took that I think 24 or 48 hours ago or something like that.
I don't even think it's like
might be off the board at this point.
It's like minus 110 or something. It's like nothing. Like there's like all the value has been like bled dry within the top 5 unless you want to like go like totally off the board. Like Paris Johnson was like the last of like the fun value, which didn't last long, but in this scenario right now, like the fun value odds are going to be where you think Stroud falls to, whether it's 7. They might not even, I don't even think they don't have picks 10 or higher listed, but they will. But right now would be like Stroud falling. Where does he go?
Okay, Luke, good stuff. So Levis Levis at 2, which means that would be he would no longer be available to the Colts at 4 based on this current mock, the Action Network podcast mock draft. We're going through it and we'll deliver some actionable info when we can. And some of it so far, just top 5, a lot of listeners are interested in that early in the draft. There might be nothing there. Sometimes the best bet is the one you don't make. On to Seattle, the Seahawks selecting 5th. As of right now, the favorite to go with the 5th overall pick at FanDuel is Will Anderson, Luke, at plus 210. And in our case here, Tyree Wilson, Anthony Richardson next, but they would be off the board. So what do you like here for Seattle at 5?
Yeah, I think this one is just Seattle running to the podium and taking Anderson. I would say this is probably best case scenario for Seattle, where they would need the Cardinals to trade, and then they would also need the Texans to take a quarterback at 2 in order for this to happen. Where Anderson and Rob Statton, I brought him up a bunch. He has been stating that Anderson is basically like the lottery, who they want, everything they need. Where I think if it's Tyree or Richardson, then they might think, and they might go Richardson over Tyree. I guess based off fit from what Statton said. But Anderson, I think there is some decent value at plus 210, where really, if you believe that the Cardinals are going to trade and you think that Tyree is going to get drafted before Anderson in the top 3, or if you think the Texans are going to go QB, like Anderson, this is his ceiling. I don't really see many scenarios where Anderson gets past 5. I mean, I've seen scenarios where he gets to the Lions, which those are just like crazy. Like I even think I did like a gut mock draft where he did, because I was trying to get Witherspoon to the Raiders, and the only way I could get Witherspoon to the Raiders was if Anderson fell to 6. But yeah, like if Anderson's there at 5, like it's like minus $1 million for me.
On to pick number 6. The Detroit Lions are next on our big board. They selected 6. We discussed Devin Witherspoon on our NFL draft betting update episodes when he was running the combine, and he starred. He's at minus 110 to go 6th in the defensive backfield, a position that they've been upgrading in the offseason. Of course, there's some other stories off the field that have been going on with the Lions that has hurt their depth in ways. Nick, what do you like at 6 here for the Lions?
I don't think that the additions at cornerback preclude them from taking a cornerback here. And there's a reason why the betting markets and the sports books have view Devin Witherspoon as a favorite for this pick. He fits a lot of what the culture and the new regime really, really wants, that football passion, that culture, that leadership, that tenacity, and just overall being obsessed with football. That's what Dan Campbell wants. That's what Brad Holmes wants in a player, all those intangibles there. Devin Witherspoon, he also, I see the narrative out there where he could remind Aaron Glenn, who's the defensive coordinator there, of himself. But mostly Detroit just has a large need at cornerback, and it's not immediate to where, oh, you have to have a cornerback this year. And in fact, I would argue defensive tackle is probably a greater immediate need, which may put Jalen Carter in play. Mm-hmm. However, after 2023, when these contracts expire, Mosley's contract expires, I think CJ Gardner-Johnson's expired, the cornerback room is really pretty barren, especially after the Okudah trade. So I believe I'm going to mock here Devin Witherspoon to Detroit. There are scenarios that I think where I think they would prefer Will Anderson, but the only scenario that would exist where Will Anderson goes if Seattle somehow takes Tyree or prefers Tyree over Anderson, but Luke's saying that that's probably not the case. Again, I think it's a long shot for sure, but if Will Anderson isn't on the board, I think that Detroit really has Devin Witherspoon high. A lot of people are mocking Jalen Carter here. I'm just not buying those rumors. I just think it's a massive, drastic departure from everything that this regime has prioritized in terms of cultural fit and leader fit and kind of being obsessed with football. Maybe they feel, hey, we have an extra first-round pick, so maybe we'll take that luxury. We have a needed defensive tackle. But if they were considering it a luxury, I think a quarterback would probably be more in play, maybe like a Stroud as opposed to a Carter. I just don't really see it with Detroit. It's possible, but it would really surprise me if they go in the direction of Carter, and it would be inconsistent with everything that they've really been prioritizing so far, this regime. So I'm going to go with Devin Witherspoon, cornerback here.
He is the favorite, Witherspoon, the favorite, the corner out of Illinois, the favorite to be the first cornerback taken right now at FanDuel -200, again, -110 to be the 6th overall pick to the Detroit Lions. Go ahead, Luke.
And this is one of like within the top 10, this seems like it's one of the few certainties we have, I guess you could say, or like consensus picks where I get like Jalen is like somewhat of like the landmine within the top 10 where no one really knows where you're going to go because you don't know how teams value character team to team. Where the bets that would align with Witherspoon would be, I wouldn't go Witherspoon over Gonzalez at -200. I also wouldn't go under 6.5. I think it's like -105. I think you just want to go Detroit Lions first pick cornerback, which I think is -105, where this is another one where I think Gonzalez and Witherspoon are closer than what is perceived at this point, where there's just a lot of love for Witherspoon, whether it's on Twitter or whatever. Like it's just a groupthink love where you can get almost equal odds because the under 6.5 is basically just saying whether it goes to the Lions or not, where you can get better odds almost by just going cornerback and covering Gonzalez as well.
Right. And I think the Raiders would be in on Witherspoon if the Lions do pass for whatever reason. I think the Raiders would definitely be in there. And I wanted to mention another reason that Witherspoon's being mocked over Gonzalez, because you mentioned Gonzalez. I think that possibly to the Lions, we're considering the man coverage there, where Witherspoon's seen as the better man coverage player. And the Lions, I think they were 3rd in the league in man coverage snaps last year, maybe 2nd. I read that somewhere. And so that's another reason why they could prioritize Witherspoon over Gonzalez, whereas other teams like Arizona, who play more zone coverage, maybe they would prefer Gonzalez in the top 10.
And as we know, the Raiders had one of the worst secondaries in football last year, so any addition they could make to the back end of their defense would make some sense. They pick at 7. And quickly, before I move on, Witherspoon at -110 at 6. Is that any value there, Luke, before we move on? Or do you encourage it? Because I know you were salivating about his 40 time when we did the update a few weeks ago.
I would just take Lions cornerback first. It's the same bet. So position Lions to draft first, and it's cornerback, defensive back, and I think it's like -105 or something.
Okay.
Which it's basically the same bet as Witherspoon under 6.5. Because if Witherspoon doesn't go 6, he's not going top 4, and he's not going to go to the Seahawks from what we know. So it's either 6 or bust, which is basically the Lions taking cornerback. But you even cover if the Lions trade out and trade back, it could still win, where the under 6.5 wouldn't.
Okay, Luke, you're next. On to Vegas. Their big offseason splash was adding quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, reunites with Josh McDaniels. Even with that, they've been connected to possibly taking a quarterback. Are you willing to bet or throw out there that CJ Stroud at 7 makes some sense, or do the Raiders try to improve elsewhere and be more win-now centric with Garoppolo under center?
So, and I've mentioned it many times, but like to me, if you're a team and you're going to take a quarterback in the top 10, or like if this is your franchise quarterback, you either trade up for him which there's a spot that they can trade into for probably pennies on the dollar relative to other years. But if the Raiders aren't trading up to 3 to get, let's say, Stroud, I'm not sold that they're going to be taking quarterback at 7 if he's there. They in all the mock drafts, you see the Raiders trading up, and to me, I think no one really has any idea who to make the trade with the Cardinals for with. And the Raiders are just the most logical and the easiest to do, where everything else just falls into place. So I think I don't think Stroud. I think Falcons would have a harder decision to make than the Raiders. You got Jimmy. I'm just not sold on quarterback for a multitude of reasons, and I'm going to go Paris Johnson at 7 here, where Paris Johnson, you're hitting all the buzz, where the Cardinals are the trendy pick, which if the Raiders just flipped, Paris Johnson is perfect at 7. Like, that is a great value for the Cardinals to take him at 7, or for the Raiders to take him, which there's Charlie Campbell, who is one of the best mock drafters we have historically, and he's been connected to the Raiders, and I don't know how he's connected. I truly don't, but he is, and he's gotten every Raiders pick for the last couple of years. And he is saying the same sources he's had are telling him Paris Johnson at 7, which you can question whether he still has it because Mayock's not there. But apparently he does. And he's had Paris Johnson at 7 for months, and all of a sudden it's somewhat coming to fruition that Paris Johnson's range from 9 to, let's just say, 13 is becoming 3 to 9. So everything you read is the Cardinals, but also in context, it says teams don't think Paris Johnson will be there at 9. Which to me, you got 3, 7. I guess Falcons might be a dark horse.
Bears too, maybe, if he falls to 9.
Well, he wouldn't make it to 9. So they're saying Paris Johnson won't be there at 9 for the Bears, which all the mocks say will. But 7 feels like that speed bump for him to get scooped up, which they have a ton of needs. Cornerback's trendy. I think if Witherspoon's here, it's automatic. But no one, it's like one of those, like, you're not expecting it, but it makes total sense. Where their offensive line has been so bad. They just signed Jimmy G, who has happy feet, who needs clean pockets, and just inserting Paris at left tackle just makes a ton of sense. So yeah, I'll go Paris at 7, which there is the value for this. You could probably get, I don't know what his odds are right now, but Paris Johnson to go pick 7, probably like plus 5. Yeah, that one's fun. Yeah, I wouldn't say not bet it, but I wouldn't say like bet it where like I would. Yeah, I mean, it's worth a light mist, not a sprinkle. And then Paris Johnson, which is getting destroyed right now, under 9.5, severely juiced. I wouldn't lay the juice on that, but it's getting destroyed enough that I think it might come down to like 8.5 potentially. Which you're losing out on the key number, which like the key number is the Bears at 9. So I don't know if that would make it playable, but yeah, I would rather just take Paris to go 7, or like Cardinals to, which I don't think I mentioned it. Cardinals to draft offensive line, I think is like plus 500, which that would be like a perfect trade spot for them to get Paris Johnson within value. Like, I don't see them taking him at 3, but if the Cardinals trade back and take Paris, like the rumors at Cardinals offensive line make a lot of sense too.
The beauty of doing a betting podcast and you're trying to get actionable odds, sometimes when you surf around, not everything is there when news breaks. And again, we're going to get to the Jets and the Packers and what they may do. It's a long way of me saying I'm trying to figure out the favorite to draft CJ Stroud. But another way around that, there's loopholes in sports betting, folks. The loophole here is if you look at FanDuel, right at the top, you search NFL draft, number 8 overall pick. CJ Stroud's at plus 900. Now, you guys could just throw back at me and say, Clasheen, we don't think the Raiders are doing it. And Nick, you can tell me you don't think the Falcons are doing it because they're not interested in Lamar Jackson. Would it shock me if they say, yeah, we're good with CJ Stroud. We'll go with Ritter again this year, or some form of another quarterback. They went and brought in Taylor Heineke. I realized that in the offseason. They had Mariota last year. So it wouldn't surprise me if they pass on CJ Stroud. Who do you like at 8? The Atlanta Falcons are next.
It would upset a lot of fans, but I do think it would be consistent with the new regime's kind of slow build here. with being patient on quarterback once again.
Wow.
I don't think fans would be really happy, especially in Atlanta. There's a lot of fan and media love for CJ Stroud, but it's not looking like the NFL may share a lot of that love. I just wouldn't be surprised if, let's say, even all of the rumors and lately slamming CJ Stroud aren't true. Let's say just half of them are. That would be enough right there in a kind of a top heavy quarterback class to have favor other quarterbacks. Atlanta, though, I'm more trying to pinpoint exactly kind of the speed of their rebuild. And they've made it clear that they're trying to use their free agency money to build around the quarterback. There have been several quotes from Terry Fontenot saying how you have to build the team around quarterback first before you slot the quarterback who's obsessed with football in there. And the Falcons did make a lot of moves, but I don't know if I don't think they're going to take quarterback they don't love, is what I'm trying to say. And I don't know if they love CJ Stroud. I'm not really sure. Would I be surprised? No, of course not. But here, I'm going to go with players that have been more routinely connected with Atlanta. I'm playing it safe here. Nolan Smith is one player that's really been connected a lot to Atlanta, not just because he's a local product, but he fits a major position of need. The Falcons have ranked last or near last in almost every pass rush metric in the last 2 seasons. I think Bijan Robinson possibility there. But to me, Nolan Smith's probably the better or more likely pick for Atlanta. So I'm going to land with Nolan Smith here. And but I got to say, Luke, I really, really like the Paris Johnson choice to Vegas. I love how you said this is not a choice that a lot of people are thinking about, but it just makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I was shaking my head in approval there because, I haven't really mocked that one a lot, but Vegas has a massive need along the offensive line. So, it could really make Chicago mad. Here, Atlanta, I'm looking at Nolan Smith. They've done a lot of homework on cornerbacks here. So, Christian Gonzalez, he played a lot of zone coverage. So, if Witherspoon's gone by either the Lions or the Raiders, Christian Gonzalez is another player that I could see Atlanta taking. So, Nolan Smith, Christian Gonzalez, and Bijan Robinson. I'm going to take Nolan Smith here for Atlanta.
Love that. Which like if I'm making a mock draft and I'm allowing trades, like this spot is perfect for a trade back with, let's say, the Titans.
Tennessee, yes.
If QB like falls, the Falcons are very, very likely, maybe not Nolan. If they're in love with Nolan, they might not trade back. But if they have a list of like Nolan, Bijan, Van Ness, they're very likely, almost guaranteed to get one of those 3 at pick 11 instead of taking him at 8. And they basically get extra picks, trade back with the Texans, who maybe didn't take a quarterback, or the Titans, who we know are in the market for a quarterback, and get picks, get the same guy they were going to in the first place. Which Nolan might not make it past the Eagles, which would be the only one room for hesitation. But all the other guys would be there, which is a prime trade back spot.
Right. That would be my concern as well. I was thinking, you just stole the words right out of my mouth, is that if they love Nolan, I'd be afraid of Philly, because I would have Nolan mocked to Philly, if not going to Atlanta. And Bijan's a possibility there too. But the argument you brought up Van Ness. I'm reading a lot of stuff about the Falcons, how they prefer Terry Fontenot comes from the Saints. They could see Van Ness as more of the Cam Jordan type with the Saints. And the Saints historically have preferred length. They really prioritize length along the defensive line. I think that's a really strong counter argument to Nolan Smith, who may have the speed and quickness, but not necessarily the length there. So I think Van Ness is in play, especially if they move back. But Luke, do you think that makes Stroud a potential bet for pick 8? Because you could cover either the Falcons maybe taking a fallen Stroud and being a possible trade out scenario to, like you said, the Titans or the Texans.
Yeah, like this is when it gets like really fun, with like the fun odds that are still here, where if he falls, like this is the perfect range to trade in.
Right.
He's even possible for the Falcons, which you're not going to like. I think they only have picks. I think 10 is the highest pick they have listed, which you're not going to get much better. He's not going to go 9. He's not going to go 10 unless there's a trade, which you still have the possibility of the Falcons taking him, and then the possibility of a team trading in for plus 800. Yeah, like you're not going to find better value on a chaos scenario than that. I would agree.
The Atlanta Falcons are the favorite to land running back Bijan Robinson out of Texas at plus 250, but we are going in a different direction here on our podcast. Also, I just looked up, you brought this up, Nick and Luke brought this up when we discussed the Lions, but they draft Witherspoon. They've done some tinkering with their secondary, Gardner Johnson. They went out and made the trade as well for Sutton. And then you look at Atlanta, they re-upped with Bates. Okuda was acquired via trade. So could they go there? But if they're not as high on Gonzalez as they are on Witherspoon, I understand the pivot to go to Nolan Smith. Okay, on to the Bears. They pick 9th. Of course, they moved back in the first round because of their blockbuster deal with the Carolina Panthers, which took them out of the number 1 spot. They're now at 9. What direction are the Bears going? And Luke, what can you add as well about value potentially from a betting perspective here?
So I think it's one of 2 options here, where I think if Jalen Carter falls, I think you can pencil him in here. Or if he doesn't, which is the $1 million question, where Jalen Carter is going to fall, because I can make an argument for his under 6.5, and I can make an argument for his over 6.5. But the reason he would fall is something I don't bet into, which is character. So I think if he falls, it's Jalen. He's not making it out of the top 10. But if he's not there, I would probably lean Darnell Wright, the tackle out of Tennessee. So I do think it's one of those 2. And I would almost say if Paris and Darnell are there, like everything you read and hear and the Bears bloggers or experts, et cetera, are like, they have a really strong opinion on Darnell. And it's not like a group think. It didn't just come out of anywhere. They do have a strong opinion on Darnell being the offensive lineman for them if they take one, but I'm going to go Jalen. He's there. He's got to go somewhere. He's the landmine that can blow everything up. Him and Bijan are the 2 that you just have no idea where to mock. And this is the spot I'm going to go with Jalen. If you want to, in terms of bets, if you want to, like, value would be taking like Darnell specific odds 9, Darnell first offensive lineman off the board. I think Jalen to go to the Bears, I think it's like plus 300. I think that's fine too, because every like mock draft I make myself, he just continues. You just have other spots to slot over him, and he's just there at 9 every single time. But at the same time, like, he is a freak. He is insanely talented and spectacular fits for 5 and 6 that I can also see him not being there. But if he gets past 5 and 6, it seems like he just slides right into the Bears unless they trade up, which I think 7 would be the Jalen trade up spot. But I'll go with Jalen at 9.
Plus 330, if you look around the market for Jalen Carter to be the pick for the Bears, or which team will draft Jalen Carter. And the Bears are the favorite at plus 330. Lions, Eagles, Seahawks, all in the mix. Brings us to Nick, and we'll pick it up a little bit here. I know we're going to spend some time on 13 and 15 because of the Rodgers trade and what that might mean for some over-under scenarios and, of course, team needs. Of course, everything could also just be, as you guys have highlighted, there could be trades earlier in this first round to screw up everyone's mock drafts across the league, and it just creates a domino effect. Eagles at 10, Nick. They've got a really great core. Jalen Hurts took a team-friendly deal. They're going to run it back with most of their roster. What could you see them trying to improve, though? What would they prioritize here at 10? I would imagine that's the direction you would go in based on what they want to prioritize.
Right. I think Howie Roseman would probably prioritize the trenches here, whether it's offensive or defensive line. It's not like the Eagles are bad in the trenches, but it is like they're getting older. And we've seen the drastic difference between the Eagles when Lane Johnson isn't playing and is playing. I believe the Eagles love Nolan Smith. I absolutely believe that Jalen Carter would be the pick if he was able here. So Luke kind of stole my pick there with the Bears, which may happen. And like you mentioned, in reality, one of these teams, whether it's 8, 9, even 7, could trade up for CJ Stroud. So I think the Eagles would probably trade down with whoever wants Stroud here.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to make a pick, though, it's going to be with Paris Johnson off the board, with Nolan Smith off the board. It's going to be and Jalen Carter. It's between either Lucas Van Ness, Peter Skoronski, and Christian Gonzalez. Not to mention, I think they would also be in on Devin Witherspoon, too. So a lot of the players they're in on have gone in this mock. But luckily, the trench is a wide field here. I'm debating, but I'm going to go with Peter Skoronski here, the guard for the Eagles. Again, I want to reiterate that because it's the betting, because this podcast prioritizes betting, I do think the Eagles probably have Carter, Witherspoon, and Nolan Smith, and probably Paris Johnson higher on their board than Skoronski. But in this scenario, you got to take what falls to you. And I'm going to go with Skoronski here. You could plug and play immediately, I believe, at right guard for the Eagles. And he would be a long-term fixture there. And they possibly could he could possibly develop at right tackle to replace Lane Johnson at some point. But Skoronski, I think he's going to fit pretty much everywhere. So you're looking at any team between, the Bears at 9 and maybe the Patriots at 14. You're looking at any team could take Skoronski, honestly.
Of course, Kelsey is back for another year at center.
Yes.
And Lane Johnson was banged up at the end of last year, had to manage him before making their run to the Super Bowl. And I will add Skoronski at FanDuel, the favorite to go at 10 overall. Skoronski at plus 250, Paris Johnson, Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter. So all the names you just rattled off in our situation here for our mock draft purposes, he would be off the board. Those names would be off the board. Skoronski would be there at 10 for an Eagles team trying to retool and, keep Jalen Hurts upright after giving him a crap ton of money. On to pick 11, the Tennessee Titans. Well, okay, I'll do it one more time. CJ Stroud is available. This seems like a home run hit at 11, Luke. Tell me otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you have to, which it seems like Stroud's the only quarterback that hasn't been rumored to the Titans. But he's
Perfect.
there. He has a need. Stroud odds to go to the Titans. I don't think we have specific Stroud odds, but yeah, I mean, at 11, you just kind of got to slot him in. Really isn't much of an explanation of someone. He's just there. They've been the team with one of the most QB rumors, and they've really been grounded around Levis, who at one point people were mocking Levis 11, 12 because they thought that's where we're going to go, or Richardson because of the bridge quarterback narrative. But Stroud being there, yeah, I mean, you just got it. Yeah, we don't have any odds on Stroud at 11 because
but we do have Tennessee to take a quarterback. Or pardon me, I always screw up the language of this. I apologize to our listeners.
I know it's a tongue twister.
It is, because in like position of whatever, you know what I'm getting at. Position of Titans first player drafted. Offensive line is the leader at plus 110 and quarterbacks next at plus 125, which we have discussed in our betting update episodes here on the Action Network podcast previously. And that would fit if Stroud's there, or it was Levis at the time, or Anthony Richardson. Like you said, Levis and Richardson were the names we kept bringing up. There's been no connection of Stroud in Tennessee.
Yeah. So I would say no at these odds because you need a quarterback to fall, which guys like Zerline or like the experts that we all follow think that a quarterback's going to fall out of the top 10. We don't know which one. Consensus is it might be Richardson, but you need a quarterback to fall or you need the Titans to trade up and to get him, which are two scenarios that seem like less likely than likely, which at plus 115, if they're still there, it's probably more likely a quarterback isn't there and really should be a lot higher. Where if anything, like offensive line at plus money probably is better value, quote unquote, just purely based off of knowing that tackles will be available at 11 that are worthy of that pick and it being a need. Yeah, I mean, if you really want a long shot, like wide receiver potentially, like I'm very against this JSN going at 11, but wide receiver to the Titans, if everyone's off the board, like it's kind of just like who else are they going to take? Which I think is like 14-1. I haven't bet it because I have JSN overs, but yeah, I don't think there's anything to bet here.
Okay. And The news cycle is constantly flowing and moving. I will add that Peter King actually did say on this day, but we are recording, Peter King came out today and said that he projects the Titans to move up and possibly draft CJ Stroud. So of course it came out today when we were,
and there was something that one of the discords from someone that I trust that would know this type of stuff. Last week, I want to say that
is he a high school English teacher? No, it's not Nick. Okay.
Word is that potentially ESPN might have pulled the reporters from Seattle for the draft and sent them to Tennessee, anticipating a quarterback being drafted there, because quarterbacks are what everyone cares about, and you want to have the most coverage for the teams that take quarterbacks. And that was a very interesting move. I'm not sure if it is. I can't say that it actually happened, but it would make sense, which would support Titans trading up or quarterback falling.
Okay, moving on to the Texans again at 12. As Luke had sort of mentioned a moment ago, possibility of Will Levis at this spot, but of course a lot of things have changed where Levis is now the favorite to go number 2 overall, potentially, or at least be the second quarterback coming off the board. So the favorite at 2, possibly to 4 with the Colts, Seattle, etc. Well, now all the quarterbacks are off the board. The quarterbacks we think are first-round quarterbacks in Bryce Young, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, and CJ Stroud. So the Texans are at 12. Nick, who do you like here at 12 for the Texans?
Right, and that's kind of an argument to go maybe with a quarterback early on, because you may not get one if you're Houston, if you stick around at 12. I mean, I think the Titans would probably take either Stroud or Anthony. If we were having the same conversation about Anthony Richardson, I think the Titans would take Richardson at 11 as well. If not, if they don't even trade up for one of those, which would probably be more likely, honestly. So the point is, we're looking at a situation where it seems likely that none of the top 4 widely considered prospects at quarterback will make it to, I don't think you or I have that making it to Houston. It's tough to say if they'd pull the trigger if it was, but here, obviously, I have them taking Levis. And so I'm going to go here and take, again, I mentioned pick 2, D'Amico Ryans. I think he really wants to come out with one of these 2 picks being a defensive building block that he can build his defense around. I'm going to take Lucas Van Ness here. I do think there's a chance that Van Ness could fall. In fact, I kind of considered this potentially his seal. I don't want to say ceiling, because maybe the Bears or the Eagles are the ceiling, but realistic ceiling. I think Van Ness could slide a little if he doesn't go here. But in this case, Houston has a massive need at defensive end. And Van Ness, again, could remind them of that athletic prototype, could remind them of J.J. Watt. I could see Houston taking Van Ness here as kind of a clean prospect here.
Such a culture fit based on that analysis too.
And this is kind of like the argument as to why I think they should go quarterback at 2, because would you rather have Levis and Van Ness or Tyree Wilson
and Hendon Hooker? Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Or like whoever's at 12.
Or Trey Lance, if they go out and trade for Trey Lance, who John Lynch did say today, John Lynch, GM 49ers, he expects Trey Lance to remain in San Francisco. That was today. But of course, there's connections between D'Amico Ryans and Lance from their time together in San Francisco. So,
yeah, and you would assume that, like, if they do go D-line, that they use this pick to trade in, assume it maybe if someone falls. But yeah, like in Jeremiah last week tweeted like his perfect draft for the Texans or something, and he had Van Ness at 12, which, yeah, all the mocks that I'm making have Van Ness at 12 too. But you definitely, like, if he doesn't go here, he could fall. I'm progressively seeing him go further and further down. Like, I'm even seeing him in the 20s, which he's been like one of those hype guys of the draft season where like he's gone from second rounder all the way into like the top 10 at one, where he feels like he's losing that momentum, but still the top 20 pick.
Okay, I'm excited for this now. Pick 13 now belongs to the Green Bay Packers, because the news in the NFL that is making the rounds. Aaron Rodgers trade is now official. So the Jets get Aaron Rodgers. They get Green Bay's 15th pick. So now the Jets are picking at 15 in the 2023 draft. The Packers move from 15 to 13, which we're talking now, and they get a second round pick this year as well, a conditional second for next year, which becomes a first if Rodgers plays 65% of the games. That's not anything that we need to worry about for this particular exercise, but we do need to discuss that the Packers are drafting at 13. And I'm not a guy who comes on here and makes the picks. I set you guys up for the picks, but Luke, I cannot take my eyes off Jackson Smith-Njigba at plus 470 to go to the Green Bay Packers at 13, just to spite the quarterback and give Jordan Love another weapon.
Yeah, so we were recording as this happened, and I had my phone on like totally silent right now, where this is like pure gut reactions, having not read anything based off of this. And I opened Twitter up for a second, and it was like just a fleecing of the Jets, like absolutely robbed, where desperate people make desperate moves, which the Jets definitely were. But the second I saw that Nick brought to my attention, it just makes JSN makes so much sense, where they're leapfrogging the Patriots, who were one of the favorites to take JSN. Mm-hmm. And I immediately bet JSN, which at the time was plus 600. Now it's plus 470, I think. And I think it could come down some more, because these types of things, JSN's going to be in every mock draft of the Packers now. And it can only come down because of how these markets work. But it just makes a ton of sense, where the Packers are taking the quarterback, or a wide receiver, for the first time since Aaron Rodgers' rookie year. And now they have a new quarterback, and the narratives will go on and on. I think it's a little bit too, tight end was a trendy pick at 15, which I think tight end was a little bit too rich at 15. And this just kind of puts it way too rich that I don't see it being plausible. At 13, I guess not crazy, but JSN will just this is like right in his range. So JSN at 13 to the Packers.
Love it. I'm happy when I felt like I was onto something and then you agree with me. That makes me feel good. And Nick, as you mentioned, Nick, we had discussed this during our brief pause, and Nick sort of kind of put that on your radar. So Jackson Smith-Njigba, for the folks that are just kind of dabbling, not fully paying attention, you kind of get involved here at this time of year, the week of. He's the clear-cut favorite to be the number one receiver off the board. His over-under position has skyrocketed. It's now I have it right here, Jackson Smith-Njigba to his over-under now is 12 and a half. So that number has been moving quite a bit. So you kind of lost your chance on that one. Okay, Nick, New England Patriots at 14. Here you go. No longer the receiver available. So what direction does Bill Belichick go? He's probably just going to draft a fucking guard, right?
That was the reason that it came to mind, honestly, about them wanting to do the switch, because I had Jackson Smith-Njigba mocked to New England for the longest time now. I think it's been like 2 weeks. And I'm one of those people that updates my mock like every day. So that was the first thing I thought of, was like, oh, they have to jump them. I think New England still could possibly take a receiver, especially if they trade down. I really do think that JSN was probably the apple of their eye, but they've done a lot of work on Zay Flowers too. I'm not bold enough to mock Zay Flowers here right now, but he does fit exactly kind of like that culture. We've talked a lot about culture, what Bill Belichick would be going for here. There's just a massive need at receiver. They have so much uncertainty after this offseason, a lot of contracts expiring in New England, not to mention it was a need even regardless of contracts. But at this point, if the Green Bay takes JSN, I think New England would probably be looking at offensive tackle. I do think that this pick's most likely going to be offense because of all the offensive issues they had last season. I know that's a very simplistic way of looking at the draft, but one of the first things I do when I'm mocking is, does this team really need this player? And before even pigeonholing positions, like wide receiver or tackle, I say, what does the team need more? Like offensive help or defensive help? And last year, with all of the controversy surrounding their offense and their offensive coordinator, and now there's quarterback issues potentially with Mac Jones, I just think that the offense needs more help than the defense. So to me, I'm leaning offense here. And then if there's not going to be wide receiver, if Zay Flowers should go a little bit later, offensive tackle is the position I'm going to knock out there. They signed a bunch of tackles like Riley Reef, and others to a 1-year deal, but the position is uncertain. I think Isaiah Wynn has an expiring contract this year. And there are, I think, Michael Inwinu, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, is also expiring at the end of this year. So, yeah, they have contractual concerns along the offensive line. And Bill Belichick, he loves his tackles. And again, Wynn also came from Georgia. I could see Broderick Jones being athletic profile where he's kind of raw now, but he doesn't have to start immediately. So, and what better team to develop a player than the New England here. So Broderick Jones to me makes a lot of sense at 14 for New England. I'll go with Broderick.
Okay. With that one, it's where is that like, if you like the wide receivers that went 10, 11, 12, and 13 were Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, and Garrett Wilson last year. And now we want to say Zay Flowers could go in that same range. That's like kind of the argument to me that I just can't get behind it. Like, right. And no player has been connected to a team more probably based off of like double visits, Boston College, which with the Patriots, like if you think you know what they're going to do, it's usually not that, which who knows, that could be a smoke. And now technically they're going to be getting one better tackle than what they've been planning for now that the Jets are out of the way, which was somewhat of like.
They could have taken Broderick Jones. Like the Jets, probably a favorite for Jones. And not to mention, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I really wanted to say here that this happened with Zion Johnson last year. He was the local product, like Zay Flowers. He was the local product that was everyone had mocked, including Breer. Had mocked to New England, I believe. Right. And that just, wasn't the route that was I don't think Zion made it to him, but you just never know what's going to happen. And how much can you really love someone's personality enough, like with Zay Flowers, to where you would take him at 14, right?
And it totally could be the case where I have a Zay over ticket, and that is one of the landmines that worries me, but it's just too much attention. I think it's one of the public, sexy positions that everyone wants to talk about, that the media somewhat drags them down further than they should be. Where there's a reason that the over-under on wide receivers has gone from 4.5 to 3.5, and I think the under's juiced now. But yeah, I mean, the Jets were probably one of the few consensus locks to take a tackle at their spot, and now the Pats are going to have one better guy than what they expected. I agree with this.
Position of New England Patriots, first player drafted, offensive lineman at plus 450. Receiver is plus 170. So
that is a good bet. Like that right there.
Plus 450. Okay. That's good stuff.
I think that's a best bet for this show for sure.
Okay. That's good. And it reflects what we just discussed about the Packers being at 13 for Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. Zay Flowers over 22.5, by the way, draft position at minus 188. As we discussed in our last betting update show, he was working out with Patrick Mahomes. So I think he probably going to fall later in the first based on where they're drafting. Okay, on to the Jets. So as a result of the Aaron Rodgers trade, the Jets move from 13 to 15. What do the Jets do, Luke? Luke gets the Aaron Rodgers picks here, these odd picks. So at 15, what do the Jets do as a result of moving 2 spots down?
So all the charts, all the trade values having to do with the like draft value, where every pick has a specific value and needs to be even, etc. Like if you go by that, the Jets got totally fleeced is what you're going to see. Like the Jets desperate, they gave up a first round pick or swapped, etc. But technically, like the Jets are kind of getting the same guy that they might be getting. Like at 13, there isn't really a huge fall off from the tackle that they're probably going to get at 15. So we're assuming it's either Broderick or Darnell, let's just say, or maybe like Paris or Skronsky. Like they still are, there's 4 or 5, like, I don't want to say elite, but like very first round worthy tackles And then after that, the drop off is huge. And taking Paris kind of drags everyone down, but the Jets are still getting one of the top 5 guys. And Darnell Wright, I think, is an easy pick at 15. Just makes a lot more sense, honestly, than I ever thought Broderick did.
Okay, on to 16. Nick, the Commanders are next. They could use help in a lot of places, as we know. I would imagine it's best available at this stage for them and where they are currently slated to pick. What do you think at 16 for Washington?
Well, I believe a player has slipped through the cracks, and I may be corrected here, but I believe I almost think New England may take this player over Broderick Jones, but I believe Christian Gonzalez has slipped through the cracks here. And that doesn't surprise me a lot because I've had a tough time mocking Gonzalez as well. Because if the Cardinals don't trade back, I think the Raiders may take Gonzalez there, and it's possible the Texans may even prefer Gonzalez over Lucas Van Ness. But if I were doing New England's pick over again, I may consider Gonzalez there. I don't know. That need for a tackle is pretty strong too. But either way, Gonzalez should not be sliding past Washington in any scenario. Washington has a need for cornerback. They've been wanting to address that this offseason for sure. So much to the point where I'm pretty, based on my intel, which, I don't have any actual connections with people who, work for Washington, but based on the people I trust in regarding Washington, I think that they really like Deonte Banks, corner out of Maryland, kind of local kid there as well. But they would love, obviously, for Christian Gonzalez to be there, I'm sure, because the cornerback position is a need. I've also heard several things, Washington being a potential Bijan Robinson selection, as well as the Eagles and the Falcons. So that makes sense in terms of, what Washington really needs, being really offense, and Eric Bieniemy wanting to give him a piece to work with there. That's obviously not quarterback, because you want to hide the quarterback there in Washington, at least for this year. So my gut tells me that this pick's going to be offense. However, the way the board's shaking out here, and the way it might on draft night, is Christian Gonzalez falls. So I'm going to have to end that slide here with Gonzalez going to Washington.
Yeah, I forgot about Gonzalez. Like, he was prime at 14, but the fact that he's there, easy. So, yeah, I don't think we're getting to the range where, like, that would be like a Gonzalez over. Let's just say there's no exact picks. Then at 17 with the Steelers, I'm going to go with, I think I'll just go with Joey Porter. There's connections. You got Banks off the board. The tackles are off the board. Anton, they had a top 30 visit, which Tomlin is the guy who basically tells everyone who they're drafting. And the top 30 visits are one of the keys to figuring that out. And Bryce, Anton, Ringo are kind of the 3 guys that have traction in terms of who people think they have interest in. But yeah, Joey Porter got the connections. It's pretty obvious. It's one of the most mocked picks there. Mm-hmm. But I think guys aren't falling that we might have based off this mock. That Joey Porter at 17 makes a lot of sense. Huge need, which would be an under 19.5 bet.
Right. Yeah, I have Porter going later. And you mentioned that Banks is off the board. Would you take Banks over Porter here with the Steelers? Because Banks still is on the board. I didn't have him going to Washington. I would have had Gonzalez not falling then.
Yeah, I think Porter is like a prime guy to fall later than when he's being mocked. But actually, I'm going to go Anton. Anton at 17. I'm changing my mind. Anton at 17. Top 30 visit. It is a need. Porter's the trendy pick, which I kind of just got sucked into. But Anton, who's a riser in the draft, just makes a lot of sense. And they can get someone like Ringo, or the top half of the second round has corners I can make an argument for more there than I could based off who's available now at 17, I think.
Right. I didn't mean to change your mind there.
No, I'm glad you did.
Throwing it out.
I'm glad you did.
But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Porter or Banks is drafted by the Steelers. But yeah, they do need an offensive tackle, and Harrison's the best one available.
Okay, let's zip through these last couple because we got to get out of here soon. Let's go to Steelers next. So the Steelers at 17, we just discussed that. How about the Lions, Nick, at 18? They already took a corner earlier in Witherspoon based on our mock draft.
Right. And I really would have them going Deontay Banks here had they not taken Witherspoon. I think they're really, really high on Banks. Other people, other sources that I trust are saying the Lions are going to be really interested in addressing the offensive guard position here, along with Kalijah Cansey, who I think they probably have high on their board due to some past history there with Brad Holmes and Aaron Donald, the Rams. But I do think it's a little rich for Cansey if it's not Detroit here. So I'm going to go with Miles Murphy, who I think will be selected around this spot here. Pass rusher out of Clemson. And that's if Detroit could take a pass rusher if one falls, Wilson or Anderson at 6. And then we could be getting Deontay Banks here. But in this scenario, I think they kind of fortified the defense right now, and they'll take Miles Murphy to pair up with Aiden Hutchinson last year. And James Houston kind of coming off the bench being that change of pace pass rusher role. I think they'd really, really like that along their defensive line.
I agree.
Still haven't heard Bijan Robinson's name yet. Tampa would be next, Luke.
And he is off the board. I mean, Bijan is like the landmine that no one knows.
You're going to take him here right now at 19.
Yeah, I'm going to go Bijan. You got Fournette out. It is just an awful team. He is an impact player where I honestly would be surprised if he fell. Like his over under is 13.5 or 15.5. This would be a Bijan over, which I told myself at the start of draft season that I would not bet a Bijan over, even though all the mock drafts tell you it's an auto. This is just honestly the tackles are off the board. If Bijan Anton, I might have gone Anton, but like I just can't see Bijan getting this far. And for a team that has so many needs, maybe a fan base that is going to be very unhappy this year. This seems like a last hurrah and maybe making some people happy. And Bijan, you can make an argument on any pick. Like, any pick isn't wrong because he is a generational talent. So Fournette's out. I know they drafted a running back in the second last year, but every team needs 2, and he just makes sense at 19.
Oh, jeez. All right. Well, they give Baker a running game, I guess. He needed that when he was in Cleveland. His over-under draft position set at 12.5, Bijan Robinson. But truly good running back going in the freaking top 10 in this day and age. Look what's going on right now with Saquon, and Zeke just got let go. Sorry, small rant. Okay, Nick, take us home. Pick number 20, Seattle, then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I do think actually Bijan could go to Atlanta or Philly, and actually I think Detroit, even I just said them. I think Detroit consider Bijan as well as Washington at 16. But and I agree with Luke. I actually would have mocked Bijan at 19 too in that scenario as well. For Seattle, I'm looking at Zay Flowers because I think he's perfect for the slot there with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the outside. But in this mock, I'm going to go with Deontay Banks because I really do think he's going to go around this area, that 18 to 23 range. And so I think at cornerback, the Seattle likes longer cornerbacks with a lot of athleticism. So I'm going to go with Deontay Banks here for the Seattle Seahawks.
Oh, all right. Yeah. In which, guess what his over-under is? 20.5.
Oh, there you go.
Which perfect. I would have had Banks ahead of Joey too. Love that.
Gentlemen, thanks so much. Nick, thanks for stopping by. Nick Garisco, Fantasy Law Guy, catches work over at fantasylawguy.com. Thanks for stopping by the podcast. Great work, great insight. Go read his stuff. He's pretty on it when it comes to the mock draft each and every year. Draft starts Thursday. We have another NFL draft betting update episode releasing Wednesday afternoon. Myself, Luke Swain, Travis Reed from Bet Labs will be with us, and Evan Abrams, our director of research at Action Network, will also stop by, provide his research and some tidbits to get you set for the draft, which begins on Thursday. I'm Brendan Glasheen. Thanks for tuning into the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. We'll talk to you again later this week.